Would you believe me if I said I've never been out of the country before? Well, today, that's about to change. We're at Logan Airport in Boston, and we're about to make our way to Sweden. I've never been on a trip like this before. The concept of it was honestly a little bit scary to me, but something I've kind of realized is that if something scares you, you probably should do it. So I'm gonna take you guys all along for my little adventure, so stay tuned.
After getting a pre-flight snack, we began our roughly 10-hour journey to Stockholm. Here we go. I knew we were in for a long day of traveling, but at least the airline kept us well fed, and I always enjoy looking at the flight tracker in lieu of a window seat. With our first leg of the trip done, we arrived in Amsterdam, and with no time to lose, we booked it across the airport to our next flight. After touching down and navigating a sprawling network of public transit, we finally arrived in Stockholm.
And we have finally arrived in Stockholm. Now, I gotta say, that was probably the longest travel time that I've ever endured in my entire life. I've been awake for almost like 24 hours now, just from having this flight today. So I think I'm gonna go inside and have myself a fat nap, and then we'll see what happens from there.
After some much needed rest, we decided to explore the neighborhood and found these scenic trails that were actually quite popular with the locals. For our visit to Stockholm, we were staying in Örnsberg, which translates to Eagle Mountain in English. And befitting of such a name, there was a rocky cliff by the trail that I just had to climb. Once we made it to the top, I love nature trails, and this one really delivered. Absolutely gorgeous.
So we've just gotten off the train, we've arrived in Karlaplan, and it is just an absolutely beautiful day outside today. We're gonna be hitting some museums today and heading to an amusement park, so we've got a pretty fun day ahead.
Our first stop was the Swedish History Museum, a perfect primer for someone's first trip to the country. The first exhibit we checked out was the Gold Room, which claims to hold 52 kilos of gold and 200 of silver. I was honestly expecting to see piles of gold and silver bars, but instead, it was all different kinds of jewelry and accessories from a variety of cultures and time periods. Then, it was off to the Viking exhibit, after my own heart. This was not at all what I expected. It was focused a lot less on warriors and legends and more on everyday life, the good and the ugly. All these preserved skulls and artifacts tell you something about the way the Vikings actually lived their lives. You can even experience the smell of a farmstead, which I think is an acquired scent. I love when museums have all these interactive exhibits, like here, where you can try your hand at tying some basic knots. The museum trip is off to a great start, and I cannot wait to see what else happened.
Well, I'm sure that the History Museum had a lot more to show us, but while we were there, we had just gotten out of the Viking room and the fire alarm got tripped, so we had to leave. Onward and upward, we're just going on to our next stop.
With our first museum visit cut short, we moved on to our next stop, the Vasa Museum. So the Vasa was commissioned by the Swedish King Gustav II, and on its maiden voyage, it tipped over and sunk. The ship was raised from the water in the 1960s, preserved and studied for how it functioned and where things went wrong. It turns out a series of engineering mistakes would lead to the ship's immediate downfall. The museum also contains a surprising amount of human remains that were found on the ship. While some people were able to escape the Vasa before it sunk, others didn't. Based on what's been preserved, you can actually tell where people were on the ship and how they might have met their demise. How chilling. It's pretty unfortunate for the old king. Imagine you commissioned a gigantic ship, adorned it with sculptures, a symbol of your royalty, only for your legacy to be how badly built it was. While the museum is interesting, the irony is not lost on me. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the absolute best part of the Vasa Museum, the Lego room. Yes, that's right, they have a room full of Lego dioramas of various ships and shipwrecks from across history. While this exhibit is mainly for kids, it just goes to show that no matter how old you get, Legos never stop being entertaining.
All right, so we're at about 4 p.m. local time, and so far the day's been really good. The Vasa Museum especially I thought was pretty funny because of kind of all the effort that's been expended for a ship that sunk. The Gold Museum, a little bit disappointing, but the Viking room, I loved the Viking part. That was definitely my favorite part of the day. It's starting to get pretty stormy out here, so we'll see where the rest of the day takes us. We are still about to head over to Gröna Lund, the amusement park in Stockholm, so stay tuned.
As soon as we got to the bus stop, it started pouring. Of course that wasn't going to stop us, so we made it to Gröna Lund and scrambled to find a dry spot.
All right, well, the rain has subsided a little bit. I have changed my shirt. You know, I think it's high time for us to get on some rides before the concert starts, because we're actually seeing a concert tonight as well. The Offspring is playing here tonight, and I am so excited for that. I love punk music. I love the Offspring. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this tonight. But in the meantime, we got some rides to ride.
You got everything, Noodles. You got the people, you got the rides, you got the pizza.
I can smell those nachos.
But the crowd's what we're really here for. This is what it's really all about.
I mean, look at them, they're beautiful.
Look at these beautiful people out here.
I can recognize some of these faces.
That's right. That's right. We've got
some of you guys have been here with us before, right?
we've got some friends now.
Okay, so we made it back to Örnsberg after our very long day, and that was everything. That was so awesome. I don't think I've ever seen or even heard of concerts happening at an amusement park like that, but I was really surprised to find out that Gröna Lund had an entire lineup of concerts that basically goes to the entire summer. Anyway, I am so tired right now. My legs hurt. I am sweaty. I am wet from the rain. So it is time to go to bed, and I will catch you guys tomorrow.
Another beautiful morning in Stockholm. After a relaxing start, we realized we were late for a boat ride and dashed across the city. And success! We made it just in time. I got myself a pick-me-up while on the boat, and we sailed off to Drottningholm Palace, the royal family's summer home. As expected from a royal estate, every room is festooned with artwork, marble statues, and massive paintings with historical and religious scenes. I particularly liked these marble statues where they used different types of stone to distinguish between skin and clothing. Very creative. Can we talk about these ceilings? I feel like every royal palace needs to have these large-scale, epic paintings that cover the ceiling of an entire room. Not every room in the palace has these, but the ones that do, beautiful.
So we are just exiting Drottningholm Palace right now. It's probably my first experience going into like a royal castle and exploring all the different rooms and how they've been preserved. I'm not usually one for historical paintings, and there was definitely a lot of those to explore, but I always love the marble statues, the busts. Those are just...
The main palace overlooks a gigantic French-style garden, both well manicured and heavily guarded. There are so many fountains, waterfalls, and even hedge mazes, but with my quick wit and intuition, I was able to lead us out without any problems. Sort of. Our next stop was the Chinese Pavilion, but not before stopping at a cafe for a quick lunch of pear juice and a savory waffle. It was actually pretty nice. We finished with me trying a biskvi, a Swedish cookie similar to a macaroon. The Chinese Pavilion was actually a surprise gift to Queen Lovisa Ulrika from her husband King Adolf Frederick, and is a drastically different style than anything in the main palace. There's a lot less to look at in here, and this building is a little more dilapidated, but intriguing nonetheless.
Okay, so we're just now leaving the Chinese Pavilion, and I gotta say, compared to the main palace, I admittedly wasn't that impressed. Don't get me wrong, I like the art style. There just wasn't that much to look at. It just felt very empty compared to the main palace. I like the main palace, but the Chinese Pavilion, admittedly, I could take it or leave it. But we are now heading to something that is very near and dear to my heart, which is the theater that is on the palace grounds, which is allegedly the oldest operating theater in the entire world. And you know me, I love the theater, so we're gonna go check that out, and I'm gonna be a bit of a nerd about it. So let's go take a look.
I was surprised to see just how well the Palace Theater was preserved, and that they still perform shows today. This theater is most associated with King Gustav III, the quote, Swedish theater king. He brought in performers from across Europe, and even wrote and directed some operas. until he was assassinated at a masquerade in 1792. I was especially fascinated with the stage and its mechanics. The stage itself is 62 feet deep and uses forced perspective to look even deeper. Each layer of scenery has an individual track that can bring out any number of backdrops or set pieces. It's a lot more intricate than I would have guessed. After our visit to the theater, it was time to head back and get ready for our special dinner reservations. We made our way over to the historic Den Gyldene Freden for dinner, and of course, I had to have some Swedish staples. Starting with a smoked herring dish and moving on to the Swedish meatballs. It's no wonder this place has stayed open for 300 years. It was delicious. We got out just before midnight, and look at how bright the sky still is. That's the Swedish midnight sun for you.
Despite how tired I've been just from traveling abroad and feeling the jet lag, it still makes me just want to be out later and just enjoy more of that time. It just really feels great to have all that extra daylight and be able to, spend time out and just, have a great time.
One royal palace down, today we visited the other royal palace. While Drottningholm is more of a summer retreat, this royal palace is all business. The setup was similar though, albeit with more modern elements. There are marble works, paintings, and a large display of different coats of arms worn by the royal family. It's cool to see the differences between the two palaces. If you're more interested in recent history and the current state of the Swedish royal family, this is definitely the place to check out. After our royal visit, we went to the Nobel Prize Museum for a little snack. This is called fika in Swedish culture. The idea is to take a break during the day and have a pastry and a coffee with someone you love. How fitting. This is a dammsugare, a cookie butter pastry covered in chocolate and marzipan that's named after vacuum cleaners. We also got the Nobel ice cream. It tastes as interesting as it looks. Now we're headed back to the palace to check out the Royal Armory. Now this is up my alley. As you'd expect, this showcases all sorts of royal outfits, weapons, and armor throughout Swedish history. The objects of interest here span the entirety of Swedish history, from the beginning all the way to the 21st century. It features all manner of things from knights, aristocrats, and even some assassins. Like here, the outfit worn by the Swedish theater king, and the weapons used to assassinate him. The Armory also has a lot of interactive exhibits, like this dress-up room where you can try on the royal outfits. As you can see, we had a lot of fun with this one.
All right, I've made it to the masquerade. I hope nobody assassinates me.
There's also this display where you can smell the smells of the battlefield. Not exactly pleasant.
After much deliberation, I've decided that this one is blood, this one is mud, and this one is corpse. I'll be taking no questions.
But I've saved the best part of the Armory for last. I present the royal carriages. lunch today, we found a bit of a familiar place. Happy Lamb Hot Pot is one of my favorite restaurants to go to in Boston, so to find it here was a very pleasant surprise.
I am satisfied. I'm always satisfied when I go to Hot Pot. It was just really nice to see something that I was a little more familiar with and kind of be able to compare the differences between them. If you've never been to a Hot Pot place, I highly recommend the Happy Lamb in Boston. This is not sponsored, obviously. I just think that it's a really good meal, and yeah, I'm happy.
Who would think that seeing a movie would be something you're excited about on a trip abroad? Well, Ghost is one of my favorite bands, and they're from Sweden, so it only made sense to see their new concert movie in theaters. After the movie, we discovered this hidden alley behind a hotel that led us to the ICEBAR. As the name suggests, everything here is made of ice. The decor, the furniture, even the glasses. We had to put on these ponchos and gloves to get in since the bar itself is kept well below zero. Sure, it was cold, but you can tell there was a lot of care that went into building this place. I particularly got a kick out of all these movie references that they had put inside the ice. The drinks turned out really tasty, and it made for a really cool nightcap that I've never experienced before. Definitely worth a try.
All right, so it is our last full day in Stockholm today, and as fitting as it is, it's on Midsummer Eve, the longest day of the year. I've already been enjoying very long days here. The sun's been out quite a bit, and today it's gonna be out really late, even later than yesterday, apparently. So we're about to hop a tram and go do some fun stuff today.
So we started our day at the Viking Museum, and knowing me, I cannot get enough of the Vikings. Unlike the exhibit at the History Museum, this one is all about the myths and the legends of Vikings. It plays more into the idea of Vikings as warriors and conquerors. While this may be a bit embellished, the museum is still very immersive in its storytelling. Take, for example, this ride in the Viking Museum that tells you the story of a Viking saga. Have you ever heard of a museum with a ride in it? I don't think so.
Look out! Behind you is Björn!
We were introduced to the game of Hnefatafel. The black pieces try to capture the king in the middle, while the white pieces defend. So there we were, locked in mortal combat. Until we realized we didn't know the rules well enough and ended in a stalemate. Turns out we finished up just in time for a Midsummer Sacrifice. We were encouraged to write a note in Nordic runes to be burned as a message and offering to the gods.
Låt oss högt ljuda för gudarna. Häll! Häll! Vi skålar för offergåvorna. Häll! Häll! Vi skålar för detta blod. Häll! Häll!
My message had reached the gods, and it was time for me to claim my rightful place on the throne. At least until I got hungry. After a couple burgers and trying some mead at the museum restaurant, we were on our merry way.
All right, so we just got back from the Viking Museum, and I thought it was kind of cool to compare the one that we just saw and the Viking exhibit down at the History Museum. I thought the ride was cool, and the meal we just had was absolutely amazing. I love the brisket burger. But now we're gonna head back to Drottninggatan and do some shopping.
Unfortunately for us, by the time we got back, it was well into midsummer and most of the shops had closed up for the day. The ones that were still open were for souvenirs and definitely geared towards your average tourist. Go figure. As the rest of the country had begun their midsummer celebrations, it was time for us to turn in as well, enjoy our evening, and say goodbye to Stockholm.
And so we've come upon the end of our last day in Stockholm. It's about 9 o'clock local time. The sun is still shining as ever. The sky is bright and blue. And we've kind of settled in. We've done so much over the past few days, and I really want to thank you guys for tuning in and following us on our little adventure. We're not leaving the country just yet. We have another week or so, but we are leaving the city tomorrow morning. So I'm going to call it an end for this episode today. And yeah, once again, thank you for joining us on this adventure. And until next time, take care.